like to call the meeting in order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Burke County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for Tuesday, June 20th, held here in the chambers at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, we have Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Burns, Vice Chair Britton, and Commissioner Carswell all in attendance. We also have our County Finance Officer, our County Attorney, as well as our County Manager, ma'am. I would remind everyone that please silence all your devices. I'm glad to see a big crowd here tonight. I was a little worried about all the rain, but y'all managed to get here, so that is great. Just be careful going home. I would ask all speakers to activate their microphones before speaking, so you will have a red light. If you come to the lectern, make sure that is on so you can be heard in the audience, and you can be also heard on YouTube as well. And I'd first like to start by expressing my condolences to Lorinda Johnson for the death of her mother, Mary Ann Twalick. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Lorinda. And you are in our thoughts and prayers, you and all your family. This time, gentlemen, I'm going to ask Pastor Keith Barnett, Bridge Worship Center Ministries International, to lead us in our invocation, if he'll come forward. And then, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please remain standing, I'm going to ask our County Attorney, J.R. Simpson, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance afterward.
Lord, we come to you today, God, Lord, to give thanks for your goodness and your grace. Lord, you said in your word that you knew the plans that you had for us, and we thank you for that. For forgiveness is one of them. And Lord, we thank you that we can come humbly to you. For your word says that, Father, if we'd humble ourselves, that you would heal our land. And Lord, we thank you for the healing that is coming. And Lord, we're praying for courage tonight, for each one to stand for the right things under God and liberty. And Lord, you said you would be with us through it all. And we thank you for that, for we know that you're with us. Lord, we pray for direction for each and every one here tonight. That, Lord, that they go for the path that is directed by you. Lord, you said in your word that unless God builds it, it won't stand. And Lord, as you direct them to build, we know that it will stand. And Lord, we bless them for the works of the faithful and true. That, Lord, you said you would enlarge their territory. Grow them, strengthen them, God, by your holy word. And Lord, we thank you for all those that will be saved by their faithfulness and their helpful, that, Lord, where they lead them to you. Lord, we pray over our city, our leaders, our law enforcement, our first responders. Lord, be with them. Touch them, strengthen them, and be with their families as well. As Father, you said, for whatever so things that we pray when we believe, we shall receive in Jesus' precious name.
Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Pastor. Gentlemen, our next item of business is approval of the agenda. You've had a chance to review the agenda. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that motion carries 5-0. Moves us to the approval of minutes for October 4th, 2022, Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting. Approval of October 4th, 2022, Board of Commissioners special meeting. Approval of October 18th, 2022, Board of Commissioners regular meeting. Approval of November 1st, 2022, Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting. And approval of November 1st, 2022, Board of Commissioners special meeting. And also approval of November 3rd, 2022, Board of Commissioners special meeting. Gentlemen, you've had a chance to review the minutes. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda minute or the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that carries 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen. This brings us to always our favorite presentation, Animal Services Pet of the Month. I saw Caitlin back there earlier, our Animal Services Director. Caitlin, who do we have tonight?
We have Miss Yodi / Yodel as our pet of the month. I did ask Miss Debbie Hawkins, she is our foster for Miss Yodi. So when Yodi / Yodel, they have renamed her, so I'm trying to get used to that, came to us, you can see in these first pictures, she was in really bad shape. She was completely emaciated, had a terrible, terrible skin infection. But now she looks like a brand new dog. They honestly brought this dog to us, animal control did, and I thought they brought us a coyote. That's why we named her Yodi, and I was terrified. I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get in trouble. We have a coyote puppy. Turns out she's just a little husky mix, and she's doing exceptional. Debbie, do you care to say a few words about what you've kind of learned about Yodi's personality?
Oh, sure.
Our fosters play an integral part in making sure we find the right homes for these animals. So,
Well, as she said, she is part husky, so she's very smart. She has learned many commands within a short period of time. She's house trained, crate trained. She knows sit, she knows down, she knows watch me, she knows with me. She's pretty much mastered it all. So she's going to be smarter than her owner, I have a feeling, because she's smarter than we are. So she's a great dog, though. Anybody would be very lucky to have her if they have a fenced-in yard.
yes, we do recommend a fenced-in yard for her. If you've never owned a husky, they are known to be escape artists. We get plenty of them in because they cannot be contained. So, but she is looking for a forever home. She's going to be spayed in the next few weeks, and she will be ready to go. So if you are interested, please reach out to us to learn more about Yodi, to get a chance to meet her in person and one-on-one. We do have a cat to share as well. Of course, we all know they do not travel well. This is Nemo, and this is Nemo before she got a haircut. Nemo had a giant mat on her back, so now she got shaved. She looks like a beautiful lioness. Long-haired kitty cat, super, super sweet. She is our longest resident at the shelter now, and I do not, for the life of me, know why. She's probably the sweetest cat we have. So if you're looking to add a kitty cat to your family, please come down and meet Nemo. I know she would love to find a forever home. We did just want to update you guys on some of our events that we had. We did have a rabies clinic on, that was actually June the 10th, not June the 3rd, and we vaccinated 185 dogs at that clinic, so that was very exciting, very, very busy day. And a lot of fun out there. We did include a little photo of a dog named Hart who was on a dog's day out, just so we could highlight that. We do have a few events coming up at Animal Services. If you guys want to participate, everyone's welcome to join. Read to a Dog is June 22nd and July 27th. We do gear this towards children, but I honestly think adults have more fun doing this. We get a lot of adults coming in, read books to the animals that we have down there. It's a lot of fun for everybody. And I do think we have an adoption event coming up on July 9th. This will be at Hillman. This will be a lot of fun too, so please come out and join us for these events. As always, this is how you reach us. Give us a call, shoot us an email if you're interested in adopting, fostering, have questions about what we can offer. We're there to help. So,
Gentlemen, you've heard Caitlin's presentations. Questions or comments? Great job as always, and I would encourage people to come adopt Miss Yodi. And Nemo looks like a beautiful cat, and I would encourage everyone to foster or adopt, and encourage people to spay and neuter their animals as well. Our population count currently today is my last question. Where do we stand?
we have 12 dogs and 22 cats. We had a big adoption event last weekend, and last week we adopted out 53 animals, so we sent a lot out last week. Yes.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Debbie. All right, gentlemen, this brings us to item number 2, recognition of North Carolina Governor Volunteer Award winners. This will be presented by Alicia Wilson, Director of Volunteer Services at J. Iverson Development Center, and I noticed good friend Paige Pitts is here as well, and she's the Volunteer Services Coordinator as well. Please come forward.
I'd like to first thank the commissioners for allowing us to come again this year to present 5 outstanding Burke County residents. As you said, my name's Alicia Wilson. I am the chairperson for Volunteer Burke, And Volunteer Burke is commissioned by the governor to recognize special people who go out of their way to enhance the lives of the people in Burke County. We also have some other volunteer service, governor's service award winners that we would like to have come up. They don't bite. I'm going to ask the winners to step forward when I call their name. Ashlyn Robinson. Ashlyn is a volunteer at Jefferson Rural Developmental Center. She's been a volunteer. She's gone over and beyond her responsibilities. As we all know, COVID was very difficult in the healthcare setting, and Ashlyn took upon herself to provide encouragement to our staff by creating Hope Jars. We put Hope Jars in every single break room. She had encouraging sayings like, "Every moment is a fresh beginning. The best is yet to be." And the staff really appreciated it and were very eager to share with each other the quotes of the day. She has a great heart and a love for everyone, and including our residents. Congratulations, Ashlyn. Is Erin Kaiser. Erin was nominated by Devonna Imes of Reason, and she's involved in every aspect of Reason, serving committees, working with registrations, transport, taking calls, reviewing, managing finances, grants, attending and speaking at events on behalf of Reason, fundraising, and training new volunteers. She also explores other means in Burke County so they can improve the services for the overflow of the abandoned and unwanted animals in our community. Congratulations, Erin Kaiser. Our next person is very special to Burke County. That would be Dr. Jenny McGrady. Dr. Jenny she's referred to Dr. Jenny as her Friends at Animal Services. She's not only dedicated her life to helping animals, but has poured passion into helping the homeless and unwanted animals in every community she grew up in. She's a strong advocate for spay and neuter. She helps with medical needs. I know I served on the foundation board for a while, and she took Saturdays, and her and Caitlin worked long hours helping the animals. She also helps out with education, advocacy, and also all of these different events that Caitlin offers to help with the rabies clinic. She does this on her own time. So Dr. Jenny, we would like to thank you for your service. John Flood is our next nominee. He was unable to be with us tonight, so Amy Kincaid for Guardian and Litem program is representing John. He's a very strong advocate for the children that he serves. Over the past years, he's been an advocate for program supervisors. He's wrote letters, made phone calls to local senators to renew instead of decreasing the personal grant for the Guardian ad litem program. In the end, he helped save Burke County positions and also 40 positions at risk throughout the state. Mr. Flood's position became permanent, and he is a very strong community member that speaks up for the rights of others. Congratulations, Mr. Flood. Our next candidate, Mr. David Tubergen. You notice that he has a medallion around his neck. The governor chooses 20 people throughout the whole state of North Carolina that goes even an extra step of over and beyond. And Mr. Tubergen was chosen this year. He was nominated by John with the DAV in Morganton. He transports veterans to medical appointments, creates newsletters, promotes membership. He assists veterans or their widows in filing benefit claims. He's an active volunteer in his county, especially with the American Red Cross, the local hospice, Amora. A few things he does is he visits the patients in their homes. He goes to the local grade schools and instructs and teaches safety. He responds to fires in the community. He's a wonderful asset to the community, and these are just a couple little things that John does for Burke County. We're pleased and honored to have David Terbergen selected as the 2023 North Carolina Medallion Award winner. Thank you.
Please remain standing. We got a little, Kay's got a little something for you. Gentlemen, now we'll step down here. We'll take a couple of pictures with our award winners.
Did you get one?
Gentlemen, any comments on that item? Once again, as a board, we'd like to congratulate all the recipients and all putting yourself above others. Thank you so much for making our county a much better place. Well, gentlemen, that'll move us to item number seven, scheduled public hearings. Our county manager will come front, and this is for the adoption of FY 2023-2024 budget and public hearing. This is presented by Brian Ipley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm very excited to reach this point of our budget process. As you all know, we've had many working sessions, community events. Chairman Mulwee and I specifically have participated in many community meetings and public presentations, as well as other board members, and tried to, I think, elaborate and articulate the purpose and the logic-based approach, the priority-based approach to the FY24 budget. As you're all aware, at our previous commissioner meeting back on May 16th, we did a much more extensive overview of the budget. I have prepared a shorter, subjective there, a lot of information, but shorter version that I will use as a refresher. But since that point, since May the 16th, this budget has been available on the county website as well as in our libraries and senior centers for public inspection. And we've worked to answer questions as those have came in. You've obviously all had this document for some time, and I'm very excited to, again, be at this point. What I'd like to talk to you about, again, briefly as a reminder this afternoon or this evening, is briefly how we've developed the budget, emphasizing the Board of Commissioners' strategic plan and priorities, encapsulating that with an economic outlook that leads to revenue projections, and then balancing that on the spend side with a real effort into leveraging what I believe is high performance, the fact that we really can make a difference with this transformational budget in people's lives in Burke County for our citizens. And then I'll close by highlighting our two enterprise funds, solid waste and water sewer.
First, I'd say that this, since I arrived February 1st, this has been the single top priority for Burke County government, for this board, and very few days have gone by that we haven't collectively talked about how to accomplish this project and what it is that we are trying to do to invest into the community. We started with really looking at prior year analytics of how we're performing. We've met with outside agencies. We've worked with legislators. There's been trips to Raleigh. We've done really what I think is a comprehensive but collaborative effort to make sure that we're understanding needs and trying to tie resources, to those needs. And finally, again, here tonight, for consideration for adoption. The budget really is a working, fluid instrument that really highlights priorities, and it's our best attempt to analytically and statistically look at objectives for the next 12 months and capture those in our best attempt to look at a crystal ball. But we really try to do that and frame it around priorities of the board. And I'm very pleased that this year, formally and for the first time, the board has worked together to highlight your 5 most important priorities. And as you can see here, each of these focus areas have specific deliverables under them that we'll talk through in just a moment, that we're assigning resources, people, time, and money to try to advance these strategic initiatives. Of those deliverables, of those priorities, really 5 from your priority setting work session all the way back in March. Really 5 of those stood out, as you can see here on this list, and the top 2 have to do with our people. We've talked about many times that we think that about 66% of our total budget goes to people, and they're really the tip of the spear when we talk about good, better, and best in service delivery and trying to impact people's lives. We think the employees of Burke County are the most important asset, and so I was really pleased that the board chose to put such a high emphasis on our people. We also want to make sure that we're exploring broadband connectivity, because we know that that's such a critical component of education, of economic development, of entrepreneurship. And then lastly, that capital plan. We know that following the 2020 facility study that the Board of Commissioners conducted with Mosley Architects, there were many of our buildings that were simply end of life that required investment to continue operating. So once we understand the priorities and we're trying to facilitate what level of investment each of those require, we also are operating in a business environment where the cost of operation hasn't simply increased. No different than any other corporation or any other business of any size. The cost of labor, the cost of materials has simply increased. And so this year, when we started the FY24 budget, to simply do the exact same things that we did last year, we saw roughly an $825,000 increase in that cost. And that inflationary cost is roughly a penny on the tax rate, because a penny is about $1 million. So again, sometimes to better understand where it is that we're trying to go, it's fundamental to first understand where you've been. And for us, it's important to understand that about 30% of our county is in a non-taxable jurisdiction, because we have Pisgah National Forest, South Mountain, we have Lake James. There's many wonderful resources that give us identity and uniqueness, but they aren't generating tax revenue. And so when I look around our region, although we have currently a 69.5% tax rate, we have one of the lowest tax bases, simply because the proportionate share of the community that isn't taxable. For the year that we're operating in right now, we got about a $7.5 billion tax base, and when you compare that to some of these other communities, you can see that that's significantly less. And what that equates to, I think that it's important to recognize that 55% of our total revenue comes from property tax, but that's a variable equation that includes both the tax rate and the tax base. And you have to take both of those into consideration when assessing what is my tax responsibility as an individual. And as we've talked about many times in your budget development process, Burke County currently is the 83rd lowest per capita tax levy in the entire state of North Carolina. And you can see in our region, we're actually the lowest. There is no county around us that has a lower per capita tax levy than Burke County. The other thing that I think is important to remember is that we are a political subdivision of the state of North Carolina, so we are created by the General Assembly. There are many things that they require us to do that we have no discretion in, that are statutorily mandated, and so I've listed those services here. as well as a cost per capita. So this means for every taxpayer in Burke County, what are they paying for building inspections or for law enforcement or for public health? And you can see kind of what that cost is. Then there's other services that we're authorized but not required to provide, and I've listed those here. And when you comprehensively look at these in totality, it's about $604 per capita. And here's an optic of the state of North Carolina, and you can see the key down at the bottom right-hand corner. Burke is here in this white color, and again, we've talked about this several times, but you can see that we're differing, and that's because our tax levy per capita is simply lower. So what does that mean? To put it simple, that means we've spent less money on governmental services. And I would tell you that I believe in high performance. I believe in local government. I believe that we have to see a product and have to really try to move ourselves from good, better, and best in all things that we do. Public safety, education, health and human services. All of those things have an impact on the community, and there is cause and effect. When you spend less, you receive less. And so when I look at our budget and our spend comparatively to regional benchmarks and peers, that lowering effect simply has had an impact on performance. Typically for a county government in North Carolina, education, public safety, and health and human services are your three largest functions. So I've quickly compared Burke County in some of those higher, more costly functions such as Sheriff's Department and detention, EMS 911, and you can see in every situation, Burke County has historically spent less. And I would tell you that when you dig into a performance and some of the outcomes of that, that there's some improvement that we really need to focus on as we move forward. Same is true with public health and social services. And these really are what I like to call social blues that really hold the community together and deal with things that most of us likely don't have to on a regular basis, but we should be thankful that someone is managing. The other point that I would share again as a reminder is our lagging pay, our compression issues, our outdated personnel policies have also driven to really a high level of turnover. In 2022, we experienced 200 voluntary separations, which is about 33% of our total workforce. And we know that when we lose institutional knowledge, that has an impact on performance. It also has a cost of turnover. We know that there's really never been a comprehensive and collective look at our entire workforce in totality. And when I look at this trend over time, this isn't indicative of the organization that we believe Burke County government can be. I mentioned this capital needs assessment back in 2020. They ranked each of our buildings at 1 through 5 across 6 systems: mechanical, HVAC, roofing, structural, those type of plumbing, those type of systems. And you can see the scores here. And pretty much anything below 2.5 would be considered end of life. So obviously some needs there. When we evaluate the economy, and again, on the 16th of May, a little over 30 days ago, we took a much deeper dive into our economic situation, looking at GDP, looking at motor vehicle value trends, looking at the supply chain for manufacturing, and really trying to get a better understanding of how our economy was performing, because that's such a driver for our budget on the revenue side. But at a very high level, we can summarize that we've had, similar to most people and most businesses, a real challenge with inflation. We've seen construction costs increasing, labor force participation is at really a 45, 50-year low. And those are reasons to be moderately pessimistic. But on the optimism side, if I'm trying to be optimistic, we are, for the first time in more than a decade, experiencing at least moderate population growth. We've seen growth in our school system. Last year, our average daily population for Burke County Public Schools was 11,500, and that's advanced to 12,100. The first time in more than a decade, we've had more students, and I think that's positive. We're also continuing to see development fees and land use revenues increase, consumer spending, and our unemployment rate is at a historical low. I think all those are reasons to be positive. And so when I evaluate, there's a lot of responsibility in drafting what I would call a recession-ready budget, not being overly leveraged on revenues and drivers that may be economically stimulated. But at the same time, I think there's reason to be positive and reason to really push and try to, again, make a difference with the services that we offer. And I think that those were our principles when drafting the revenue side of our budget. We want to rely on data in periods of uncertainty, and we think diversifying our revenue portfolio that reduces pressure on things like the tax rate is something critical that we've really tried to hyper-focus on this year. The proposed budget's balanced on about $99.8 million. As you all know, property tax continues to be our largest revenue source, and again, about 55% of our total revenue. This year, as we'll talk more about just momentarily, as you are all aware, was a 4-year revaluation cycle. As I've mentioned to you many times, personal property tax, motor vehicles, and state boards are all also components of our property tax base. And when you see that, as I mentioned earlier, our total property tax base at about $7.7 billion comparatively to the region, because of less of our county being actually taxable, is moving to about $10.6 billion. I mentioned the $99.8 million in revenue. You can see here the breakdown functionally for the different revenue sources. And I'll mention just a moment about this concept of reval. First time since 2019, we are on a 4-year cycle. Many of our regional other counties are working through similar exercises. This is highly regulated through the North Carolina Department of Revenue. They require counties to do revaluations at a minimum of every 8 years, but they certainly try to persuade you to do it more often. The more often you do it, the more accurate your values are going to be. But we were in a unique situation this year because the second component to this Department of Revenue law, in the absence of an advancement to a 4-year cycle, is when your tax values are out of line with market. And market is not something that the county or the county commissioners determine. Market is a statistical sampling of actual market-driven arm's-length transaction sales. We've talked about that, and the fact that the Department of Revenue actually screens sales that go through MLS and compares what a house sold for to the price that the county had it on the books, and they're able to dictate this sales ratio. And when your sales ratio is more than 15% out of equilibrium, out of balance, you're required to do a revaluation at that point. And you can see here, the last time the county did a reval, we were able to realign our tax values with market values at 99.2%. But that's been a steady decline, really, over the last 4 years, to the point where our tax values were substantially understated. That's not unique to us. Again, looking at a 5-county regional comparison, that's really been all over the market. And I think part of that's driven by COVID, supply and demand. An elongated period following the Great Recession where new homes weren't built and there's an inventory shortage, but obviously materials and supply chain along with labor costs have driven up the cost of replacement, which ultimately has driven up the market sales price. Again, as a reminder, the local government calculated revenue neutral tax rate for this revaluation period is 52 cents. That would be a 17.5 cent reduction from your 69.5 cent tax rate today. And as a general thought, I think it's important to just acknowledge that one's tax levy, again, is this product of two independent variables, that is the tax rate and also the value. So one can ensue once the values increase, the rate can potentially decrease to try to offset some of that increase in tax burden. So as a quick illustration of what that means, we know that the average across Burke County was about a 47.1% increase. So we've taken 3 2022 homes of differing values, an $89,000 home, a home that was $150,000, and then roughly $450,000, and we've added 47% to say what would that value be now post revaluation, what amount of property tax was that homeowner paying pre-reval, and what would they be paying at these differing tax rates. And what you can see is at a 52 cent tax rate for a home that costs $450,000, that person would be paying roughly $26 more per month. And at a 56 cent rate for the average home that costs about $150,000 now, valued at $220,000, that person would be paying an additional $16 per month. When I look at, dive in quickly to our operational budgets, I want to point out, and the board was highly supportive and encouraging of this concept of a zero-based budgeting, meaning that we did not take prior year budgets and add to them. Every single operational department across Burke County government started with zero, and we thought that that was critical, especially when really synchronized with reval, so that we feel that every number in the budget is built with a purpose, is dependable, and helps us responsibly recommend a sustainable and high-performing tax rate. This budget also includes dedicated out-year funding for capital reserve so that we avoid those current year surprises, that we're thinking forward multiple periods so that we can address the county's needs. We've established a risk management fund as well as a debt service fund. We're recommending a three-phase systematic approach to investment in human capital, a COLA of 5% introduction to performance pay, and also setting aside a reserve for a comprehensive pay and classification study. We're also proposing uniformity in our early pay discount to be 1% across all periods. We're improving what we think is improvement to fringe benefit packages. We have dollars set aside for a community-wide roadside litter cleanup. We do have funding set aside for broadband expansion, specifically in the CAB program that will be released in about 3 or 4 weeks from the Department of Information Technology and the state level. We've been able to include about a 13.5% increase in public education, as well as about a 10% increase to the community college. And we think that we've made significant movement on all of the Board of Commissioners' priorities. Our budget, very similar to other counties in North Carolina, as I mentioned earlier, human services, education, and public safety continue to be our largest 3 functional areas. And this, I think, now compares very favorably to some of those other communities when you look at how our dollars are allocated. As I mentioned earlier, your strategic plan is developed with these 5 areas of focus, and each of these areas of focus have specific deliverables related to them. When we talk about fiscal stewardship, we're really talking about debt management policies, executing on that capital plan, making sure that we're exploring opportunities to leverage outside funding resources and diversification of our revenue portfolio through federal and state grants. We want to make sure that our equity, our fund balance is maintained at a sustainable, at a responsible level. And we want to continue to look for what I call re-engineering opportunities. And re-engineering is a penny saved is a penny earned. So it isn't always about how can we generate additional revenue. Sometimes it's about creating budget flexibility through more efficiency in operations, reduction of cost per unit, cost avoidance. And we've got some what I think are innovative strategies included in the budget that we do think will help create budget flexibility on the cost reduction side moving forward. I think all of those, when added together, will be fairly significant, but we want to get into the actual implementation phase before we commit to a specific number. Public safety is another area that we were able to make significant investment, as you'll see in just a moment, roughly 13% across the board, with some critically needed infrastructure, as well as a public safety communication and radio replacement plan, which we have about 225 of these across the county. And that's what enables our public safety first responders to communicate when they're on an active scene. And again, those type of intangible details sometimes get overlooked, but a simple radio is about $5,000, and we have 225 of them across all of our functions, and that's something that's really, really important. I mentioned the roughly 13% increase, a tick over $3 million of additional investment, and this would include people, so the vast majority of that is in the human capital side. Quickly on our fire departments, we have 21 across Burke County. For the year that we're operating in now, the average tax rate is about 10.8. What we've seen is a real decline in optional volunteerism, as well as an increase in the cost of operations. And so each of our fire departments, we've met with these folks individually. We've tried to understand their strategic initiatives and what their specific communities need. Each of these departments have held a public input session. And what we've seen is collectively, again, an emphasis on paid staff, an emphasis on modern apparatus, and then building infrastructure that will house and take care of that apparatus long term. Under our community advancement focus area, I mentioned earlier this community litter and trash cleanup, as well as this broadband initiative. We continue to fund trails. We know that this AIA study, which is really a mapping system of all of our infrastructure for water sewer. Our water sewer fund is a fund that really I think can grow and serve more people, but it needs some real detailed analysis. And now our infrastructure is aging. We feel like there's a lot of opportunity there, but there's a lot of work, and we have to start with this kind of blueprint of what we have and how it's functioning. And we've also funded and plan to conduct a countywide housing study so that we can explore public policy that may help initiate some additional inventory and options for our community that spurs population growth and workforce development. Under economic growth and development, obviously, Burke Development Incorporated is the chief economic driver and engine, and we want to continue to be creative there and trying to look for ways to expand that tax base to be more competitive, as well as create high-paying jobs and diversity in our GDP. We want to continue to support our airports because we know the economic impact that those folks have, both in Hickory as well as with Foothills. Lastly here, this concept of an employer of choice. This is about curbing that 33% turnover. This is about looking for ways to attract and retain the highest talent, believing that putting the right people on the team will ultimately have a beneficial impact to all the citizens of Burke County and across all the things that we do, all the functions. And as I mentioned earlier, this concept of a comprehensive pay and classification study, which we'll actually talk about later this evening on the agenda, as well as just modernizing how we manage this human capital system, is something critical that we're looking forward to in next year's budget. I mentioned this introduction to pay for performance. We've moved away from a merit system that was antiquated and outdated, that we feel de-incentivized promotion and growth. We've taken those dollars and reinvested into a pay for performance system, trying to really drive that performance matters and highlighting the things that we believe create cost avoidance and allow us to operate in a more efficient way. And I'll talk about that just for a moment. This would allow for up to a 1.5% a bonus to be paid to full-time or to all employees in March of 2024, assuming that we hit some very specific qualifiers. And here's the concept. We're self-insured, self-funded for employee wellness costs, and we believe that lowering those through empowering people to make better health behavioral choices will ultimately save dollars. Nationally, the data says that for every dollar you invest in wellness, you save $4 in costs, and that's one of the innovative strategies that we believe that we can use to spend our money more wisely. We know that there's costs associated with turnover when you have part-time staff or overtime or training costs or equipment costs. So we think that lowering that turnover percentage to something that's more manageable will obviously reduce costs, and so forth and so on with customer service and re-engineering those 6 strategies that I talked about earlier. But the concept is let's create savings for the organization and then take a proportionate share of those savings and reinvest into our employees to continue to incentivize and motivate that high performance. And I'd like to really just point out that I think that is starting at the organizational level is really a good cultural investment too as we continue to develop this program. Here's the metrics that we'll be required to hit beginning July 1st and being measured through March. Talent retention, something a little higher than 88%. Customer service, greater than 90. Health plan costs. Medical inflation in this region is about 12% for the year. So we're saying if we can lower our medical inflation or medical increase cost by at least 8%, then we're going to be 4% to the good, and that's about an $8 million plan. So you can see pretty significant savings. You can see there at the bottom, net neutral risk management costs. So that's things we're also self-insured, self-funded on workers' comp, high plan deductible, and so trying to avoid those costly expenses really is an opportunity to have some budget flexibility. Back in April, the Board of Commissioners approved a formal 5-year capital improvement plan. It's about $63.5 million. 16.2 of that is coming in the form of pay-as-you-go. About $22 million of that we believe we're leveraging from federal and state grants, and there's the potential for installment financing of about $25 million. But this budget does continue to advance that plan as we've discussed and as scheduled. I'll briefly touch on public education. The commissioners really have had 3 fundamental goals. Number one, they wanted to be competitive. There's 118 local education authorities in the state of North Carolina. And what the investment that's made at a local level really has an impact on what curriculums look like, on student-teacher ratios, on supplements, on the ability to recruit and retain teachers. There's a lot of impacts that are made locally, and I think that's what this concept of competitive operational funding is intended to fund. You can see here how we compare from what we're able to pay local supplements to our teachers, as well as what the ratios are in classroom. And all of this is about investing in youth, future workforce, future leaders in our community, as well as establishing Burke as a community of choice, as we know that many, many employers and many people before they move obviously evaluate the public education system. So the overall funding is about $18.5 million. That's roughly a $2.2 million increase, or on a per pupil basis. It goes from 1404 to 1541, which is roughly 9.2 or 3%. On the community college side, there's 58 community colleges in North Carolina, and we've again evaluated a regional peer group of community colleges in that context that are similar to Western Piedmont, this proposed budget includes about a 7.8% operational increase, as well as a capital allocation that's predictable and manageable moving forward. We've met with Dr. Wells and Sandy and their teams and tried to understand their long-term needs and feel like this budget will accomplish each of those things. Solid waste, briefly, we have a household fee increase of $82 to $88. Total revenues are a tick over 6, expenditures are about 6.2. The budget includes a 10-year rate stabilization as well as a site development feasibility analysis. All of that is to evaluate how we can better run this enterprise fund that isn't yet self-supporting. We have improved some scheduling and some staffing improvements, as well as efficiency and safety improvements and fencing. You may have seen the restrooms that are being built at each of our collection sites. You know, those are examples of things that are upgrades and included and continue to be funded in next year's budget. The water sewer side is pretty much a similar concept. We are a purchased water system, meaning we've seen an increase in what it costs us to buy water, so that increase is being passed along to the consumer as we sell it. But this fund, very similarly to solid waste, is not yet self-sustaining, so we got a lot of work to do in this year, and we believe that this concept of a 10-year rate stabilization as well as an AIA study is the first step to better understanding how that business model needs to be modified to accomplish that. Here's our summary slide. There were 3 options on tax rate, 52, 54, and 56 cents. All of those are a significant tax rate reduction, obviously, than the 69.5 cents that we've operated on currently. And I would advocate that 52 cents offers little to no advancement. 54 cents would be what I call incremental, but still leaving some significant gaps. 56 cents is what the budget is balanced on today, and I believe that provides for transformational opportunity and begins to move Burke County towards what I would consider a high-performing local government. In order to fully implement that budget as presented, there are 8 personnel policy modifications. Each of those are in your packet for review and consideration. And there are things like what I was talking about with the removing merit, adding pay for performance, transitioning longevity, all the things that we've talked about in the past. And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions and then systematically help in any way I can to walk through these very methodical and numerous action items.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Gentlemen, we've been grinding through this process for months, met many times, so it's our last opportunity to ask any questions or make any comments.
Mr. Chairman, in reference to comments, I would like to say first that I want to thank everyone who has worked so diligently to put this budget ordinance together. This is probably, well, not probably, this has been the most comprehensive approach to a budget ordinance that I have ever witnessed, and that actually comes as serving as chairman of the Board of Education for 12 years, and in my work life, I've seen some budgets put together. I'm especially appreciative of the fact that each individual department started from scratch, and they didn't simply regurgitate what they had last year and just add something to it. I feel like that gives us a much clearer, better picture of where we are. I appreciate this board's unanimous vote to support our critically important capital improvement plan that we've addressed through this budget, as well as our strategic plan. This budget will responsibly serve the citizens of this county for many years to come. I sincerely want to say to all the department heads, everybody who has really worked to put this together, I'm most impressed. This has been you can tell it's been a labor of love, actually. I appreciate this administration, the staff, and the board's commitment to taking care of our employees and understanding that recruitment and retention is a serious issue that we've got to address going forward. If we want to offer world-class customer service, we've got to be that employer of choice, and that's how we're going to get there. You know, I had several people throughout my campaign for this office approach me, and I had a really exciting phone call one evening. He said, "Yeah, I'm going to support you. I'm going to give you money, and I'm going to put out all your signs, and I'm going to do this and that." And I was just so excited. And he ended the statement with, "But you know, if I get you elected, I might want something." Well, I ended that conversation right there. Every decision I make will be made based on facts. It'll be made based on relevant issues, not some promise that I made someone. If they scratched my back, I would scratch theirs. So I appreciate it. This budget has been formulated in the full light of day and with input from many constituents, employees from all across the county. And I will be especially happy to make a motion when we come to that time to lower our tax rate 13.5 cents.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. Gentlemen, other questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, Brian, this proposal represents about a 19.5% decrease in the tax rate if we accept the proposal at 56 cents as you've made it. Is that tax rate going to be sustainable over the next period of full revow, and how do you think that's going to happen?
So I think that's a great question. And, you know, one thing that's true is we have seen unprecedented rising costs, wage escalation, material cost, basic things that we may often take for granted. Liability insurance, for example, something that we buy that's high deductible, but still saw a 37% increase this year. And largely because, I mean, there's 3 or 4 carriers in the nation large enough to provide the size of policy that we need, and we're paying for wildfires out west. So there's things that are outside of our control. But we have tried to model this multi-year phase, approach to forecast revenues out more than just a 12-month period. Oftentimes we look at budget in a vacuum of 12 months. It's really a fluid document that's a tool to help you implement the policy that this board approves. So I say that with a high level of confidence that this is a sustainable budget in a multi-year implementation way. I also think that there's the opportunity to leverage some of the re-engineering strategies that I've mentioned. Once the water sewer fund, once the solid waste fund are self-sustainable, that'll reduce pressure on the general fund. Some of the other cost reduction strategies that were in the presentation that I know I've talked to you individually about and all the members of our board, we think just with efficiency increases as well as cost avoidance, that the revenue side will take care of itself, and we do believe that is a sustainable model, even given the investment into people, the investment into our buildings and capital. Have a high level of confidence that this is something that will serve us well for many years to come.
Anyone else? Mr. Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, I want to touch on capital projects. We've got a few. We've identified those up there, what capital projects we have. We obviously have worked very hard over the last 10 years, and we've built our fund balance up to a little bit over 30%. So there's 2 questions here. Do you think we should use the money that's in that fund, maybe consider a liquidation of debt that we have right now, or do you feel the proposed budget adequately prepares us to take care of these capital priorities that we've mentioned here.
So I think that the budget does fully fund the capital program that the board has prioritized. Again, out of the $63.5 million, a third of that's coming from federal and state grant opportunities. And $16.5 million of that is being paid for in cash. And that, I believe, with those priorities, that'll take care of the major capital needs for this organization for a period of 8 to 10 years. On the debt side, I would tell you that we currently have a 76% 10-year payout, which means that over the next 10 years, 76% of our existing debt, which is very low already, total par outstanding is about $44.5 million. And a significant portion of that is actually funded through school revenue sources. It doesn't belong to the county. It isn't paid for through tax payments. Only about maybe less than half of the $44 million. I think about $16 million is funded through property tax and through county revenues. So we have an exceptionally low debt burden. I think that right now we're earning more cash. So when you relate that to fund balance, which is essentially cash in the bank, we're able to receive a higher rate of return and interest income than what we're paying out. The board has done an exceptional job, in my opinion, of positioning itself not only with low debt burden, but for your existing debt, your effective interest rate is lower than 2.5%. So you're recouping double that in return right now. So I wouldn't think that it's an opportunity, even if your debt instruments allowed an early payment, a prepayment, a liquidation. I wouldn't think that now would be the opportune time to do that. And secondly, I think that preparation that this board has done to prepare and grow your fund balance has set you up to be aggressive in the implementation of your operational and capital plan. So to me, recognizing that 75% of your debt will be paid off over the next 10 years, that Moody's and S&P and those international bond rating agencies have given you the 12th highest bond rating in the entire state of North Carolina, would advocate for leaving that separate, leveraging your cash on hand to fully commit to your implementing your capital improvement.
Any other questions? One, Brian, I know we'll probably get more calls about need for broadband out in the county. I have more contacts. We all get them probably close to once a day, either email or call. You think we have appropriated properly in the budget to position the county to address that? This moving forward, because we want to take full advantage of CAB, which you said will be coming out in a month. And, the programs flying around out there is very confusing, but the CAB looks like it has the most flexibility and have the most benefit for this county. So we do feel that we are positioned to answer that question moving forward.
I do. I think that's been a clear priority for all 5 commissioners really since your work session back in March. That's something that was, even when you look at your top 5 priorities, and for those of us that were there that day, that means that the items that were prioritized by all 5 commissioners, there were only 5 items, and 2 of them went to our people. One of them was broadband, one of them was capital. We started with a couple years ago with RDOF grants, and then we turned into the Great Grant system. There is a Great Grant, Brightspeed Communication, former CenturyLink has been awarded a Great Grant by the North Carolina Department of Technology and the General Assembly, and that's in the process of being implemented. They're also looking at additional round 2 Great Grants, all of that being funded through the state. Spectrum Charter has a Great Grant application in for that opportunity, but the CAB grant, continuing access to broadband, requires local match. It requires you to use ARPA dollars, and we have earmarked $1 million ARPA dollars included in this year's budget to match, and it's roughly a 3-to-1 match. And to your point, it does give the county some local influence and flexibility, unlike those previous grants. So for us right now, it's about data integrity and trying to better understand, not at a census tract level, which is where the FCC and those folks have historically tracked access, but really drilling that down to the household level and understanding where underserved and non-served folks are, and then trying to craft a CAB grant opportunity that addresses those issues. and that all starts July 15th. So, I'm excited about it, and your budget, as presented, does give you the opportunity to participate in that. Where the reality is, across the state, not every county is going to have that because they haven't earmarked those very unique funding source dollars for that purpose.
Thank you. Gentlemen, any other questions, comments?
I just have one more comment. We've been, Commissioner Smith and I have been very blessed over the period of the last few months to be able to, with the help of our clerk and our county manager, go out and visit folks who provide the services to this county day in and day out. And I want to say to them, I appreciate the time and effort that they spent with us in helping us to understand better what it is that we're looking to do. I'm very appreciative, and I will be doing a ride-along sometime in the next couple of weeks with the Sheriff's Department because I don't want to leave them out, and I want the experience. So,
You going to be in the front or back seat?
Well, it depends on what's going down. I might be under the car.
Gentlemen, any other questions, comments? And I'm going to echo what I said in pre-agenda, and as Commissioner Burns mentioned, I know the thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of hours that staff, you, senior staff, employee level, our partners in the school system, Dr. Welch back there at the college. I have the honor of serving as trustee with him, and I know it was a thorough, professional process, and I'm proud of everybody that was involved with it. So, thank you. Gentlemen, any other questions, comments? All right, gentlemen, there being no more questions, we do need to hold a public hearing. At this time, I will open that public hearing. Madam Clerk, I know we have several people here to speak. Who do we have?
We do, Mr. Chairman. I would call Dr. Welsh.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Joel Welch, President, Western Piedmont Community College. Just wanted to take this evening to say personally and publicly thank you. As Commissioner Burns did mention, each of you took time to tour the college, take a look at all that we had going on, to listen to future plans, to give input. And as I think about the budget, the decision that you've got to make, I really know wherever you end up on that, there was really a good process and a good plan that was put into that, looking at the county. And for me personally and for the college especially, we really appreciate the consideration, the thoughts, and the support. We know that every dollar invested with Western Piedmont Community College returns more than $6 in social benefit to our county. We're a driver of economic development. We work with BDI and others to bring companies to our area to help increase that tax base. And you took time to look at that, to see what we had going on, the challenges that we face, our personnel. And I'll leave you with this. As the county manager mentioned, we were looking at our housekeeping services. We saw an almost 40% increase in the contracting that we've done with that. And it is a significant challenge as we look going forward. So just wanted to publicly say thank you and appreciate the time that you took personally to hear from the college and from the others in this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Welch. Madam Clerk?
Debbie Hawkins.
Good evening, members of the board, public, citizens. My name is Debbie Hawkins. I volunteer with Burke County Animal Services. I'm a foster home for dogs with medical issues, much like Yodel, from Animal Services, whose recovery would otherwise be compromised if they stayed in their current building. We also foster seniors because it's difficult to find adoptable homes for seniors. I take pictures of the dogs and cats so they can be posted on Pet Finder, an online website that helps people find and adopt their next companion animal. I currently serve as chair of the Animal Advisory Board. I'm here to support the capital project funding for building a bigger and better animal services center. Why better? Because the current building, built almost 50 years ago, is beyond repair. It is not citizen friendly, it is not staff friendly, and it's far from being animal friendly. Why bigger? Our animal ordinance is ignored by those who continue to breed indiscriminately, putting more and more puppies and kittens into an already animal overpopulated county. People who disregard the ordinance by letting their pets run loose off their property, especially those that aren't fixed. And those who think it's okay to abandon their animal. In other words, turn your animal out, and when it's picked up as a stray, don't reclaim it. Since 2020, we have seen a 40% increase in the number of animals coming into animal services. That may not seem like a lot, but when you only have 16 dog kennels and 24 cat kennels, taking in 2,000 dogs and cats a year is overwhelming. That's an average of 7 new animals every workday. 99% of the animals coming in need to be fixed, and there aren't enough vets to keep up. The owners have failed them, the ordinance has failed them, but Burke County Animal Services has not. They have worked tirelessly to try and prevent the unnecessary killing of dogs and cats. So why bigger and better? Like I mentioned when I was here in October of last year, the space and pace of our current Animal Services Center and staff cannot keep up with the constant influx of animals. The bottom line, our current shelter is not big enough, it's falling apart, it needs a medical suite, and we desperately need a spay and neuter clinic. I could go on and on with statistics and reasons to support this, but very simply put, it is about the animals and the people who do care for them. I trust you care enough to support constructing a new Animal Services Center, providing all that an improved service delivery entails, and creating an Animal Services Center that will meet the needs of the public and all the animals who are victims of the irresponsible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Tim Buff, and I've got some handouts for you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Gentlemen, I stand before you to bring you a letter from the Burke County Republican Party that we drafted at our last executive board meeting. And it's going to read it there, and it's self-explanatory. Good evening, fellow Burke County Republican Commissioners and fellow Burke County citizens. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to the board, speak to the board with the Republican Party of Burke County. We ask that, given the economic hardships that Burke citizens are faced with at this time due to the high cost of everything, food, gasoline, housing, electric bills, and so on, we ask you not to increase this burden for Burke County citizens by way of a tax increase. The reevaluation is indeed a burden on its own. Even that will add substantial financial burden to the people of Burke County. We ask that you hold our tax rate so that there is no increase on our tax bills. With the new construction that has taken place in Burke County, this should cover any cost of living increase for the county. Thank you for listening, and hope you will choose to be a part of easing the financial burden during these tough times. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chuck Paris.
Commissioners, Chairman, thank you. Okay, to begin with a question, do we actually need the 40 to 50% tax increase that faces our citizens? As a Burke County resident, also a citizen of the city of Morgan, I will be doubly affected by your new tax reevaluation because most of the municipalities use the county figures as to establish their property tax basis. A reevaluation being done at this time will greatly affect our local taxpayers. Okay, several factors about the new reevaluation. First of all, this was actually being done during a housing market bubble, which was one of the highest real estate markets in over 20 years. Secondly, the added highest nation inflation rate of 40 years is another example of why it should not be actually implemented. Okay, these are two examples this reevaluation should not be addressed at this time. Okay, the state of North Carolina mandates suggest a reevaluation about every 8 years. Burke County has adopted the 4-year plan. Originally, the thinking was not to have such a large increase at one time. We've had a 30% property tax rate increase in 2014. Increases of 30, 40, or 50% in a year are not small increases. So I would suggest postponing activating this property reevaluation. Okay? Since since watching several of your Burke County Commissioner meetings and presentations, I realized that there's extra money that has actually been brought into the coffers in 22 and 23 fiscal year. Also, this does not include the extremely large fund balance that the county currently has, which is more than double or triple what the state actually requires. So at this time, I have listened to the future proposals for short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans, and the budget amendments for our county. These plans I would recommend to all city and county citizens to look at very carefully. As fellow conservatives and you being elected as stewards of the taxpayers' money, this recommendation is before any major project funding. Please consider a referendum, because acting quickly or fast tracking of any important issue can be a failure. After all, it's very easy to be generous and liberal when you're spending someone else's money. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Susan Butterworth.
Hello. My name is Susan Butterworth, and I live at 2954 Orchid Lane, Valdez. I stand in opposition of raising property taxes or any county taxes at this time. I ask that you only consider a percentage that reflects revenue neutral until such a time the good people of this county can afford paying more taxes, avoiding potential hardship. Being a constituent and fellow member of the Republican Party, I ask that you uphold the conservative values of the party platform. As stated in the NCGOP Republican Party under Article 5, State Government, number 1, we believe that a free society power should rest in the hands of the people. We believe in limited government, which serves the people rather than one that burdens them. Number 5, we believe that government at all levels should not spend money it does not have, and avoid passing on debts to our future generations. I believe that the timing of this property value will not sustain, as they were derived during the highest real estate values in history. They've never been this high. And I remember this happening, what was it, 2007, that then they had to go back and reverse it because they jacked them up and then they went back down. I owned that home then. That was undue hardship because we had to pay those taxes for several years before they were reevaluated. And they went back down. The missing component here is the corporate tax that we had in the past. We are living off the backs of the homeowners, not GDP created by our labor. Commissioners, I ask that you manage better what you are given and stop squeezing for more. Live within your means or get more aggressive, bringing in corporations that actually pay substantial tax. Taxes, not recreational parks that we must then sustain. Forbes article released 5 days ago says the housing market forecast for June 2023. The buyer-seller stalemate held steady in May thanks to an uptick in mortgage rates and elevated home prices that together continue to perpetuate the housing affordability crisis. As fears of an ongoing inflation, bank sector volatility, debt ceiling drama, and an impending recession hang in the air. I humbly and strongly ask that you consider the people you work for and serve. No revenue additional taxes. Make it revenue neutral. Pay down the debt. We could recoup over $1 million if we just paid off our debt with that money sitting around, and maybe we're making some interest, but pay it off. And then talk about the new projects that you guys would like to have when we're debt-free. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Ronnie York,
Printer broke, so I have to do it with technology. Commissioners, Chairman, County Manager, and fellow Burke County citizens and taxpayers, I'm Ronnie York. I'm a lifetime 70-year resident of Burke County. I've never left the county. Tonight we face a conundrum, which by definition is a confusing, and in this case, a very difficult problem or question, which actually for us are many difficult questions. I was present at the May 16th presentation of the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget. Since that time, I have spent many hours, sometimes till mid-morning, on YouTube reviewing that meeting that I attended in detail. I looked at all aspects of the graphs that our county manager presented, his supposed facts and figures, etc., that they were presented. Yes, I did research. I took notes. I rechecked data. And I became furiously concerned by what I heard, what I saw, what I went back and researched on these graphs. Likewise, I spent much additional time recently since the June 6th pre-agenda meeting. I did the same thing. I followed up, and that meeting actually elaborated and provided additional insight to the May 16 budget presentation. Actually, I got more concerns after reviewing that pre-agenda meeting. There are far more questions and concerns that I can share than 3 minutes will allow. And I'm going a little slower than I initially thought because I want this to hit home. But I will focus on one area only. That's the word growth. As in county government, and likewise greatly increased spending. And that's what we're looking at. Deny it all we want to. Item number 1, unexplained, unneeded, rampant, I'm using the old term, social services. Now we call it health and human services. All comes under the same umbrella. That's the cost showing on our graphs of 26% of the budget, 7% growth for the next fiscal year. Again, likewise, your tiered growth charts indicate a tremendous demand for new building, infrastructures, and associated operational cost, though hidden in this long-term tiered proposal. Item 2, that Burke County leads this region in the massive drug addiction issue that our county manager presented, of which we have no doubt. I see it where I live. I see it across the county. Again, the graphs verify this. At this time, unfortunately, there are no real-world proven treatments for drug treatment. They don't exist. I've researched it. I've talked to physicians. Yet planning a mid-timeline that indicates we're interested in a regional drug treatment facility, I don't see an indication of how much Burke County is going to contribute to that. I know you've got some drug settlement money, of course, we know about that. And perhaps we're going to utilize an existing structure. You know what I'm talking about there. However, this has every option to become another money pit, and I think you're aware of that. Item 3, and this is the one that I'm going to use to top off the growth issue. Multiple new county positions. I'm taking all this information from the budget presentation, and apparently they're administrative. The lesser ones I have chosen to leave out. First one, number 8, a new public health position at $80,000. Why? Second level, a new human resources position at $85,000. Why? The third one, this is the one that really blows your mind. Tighten your seatbelts. Not one, but 2 new budget, strategy, and performance positions at, get this, $205,000. So, are these 2 new assistant or associate county managers? Don't we already have 2 assistant county managers? Just from these notes, I'm going to ask you one question. Should and will Burke County become the San Francisco of the East Coast? We are following the Washington, D.C. free spender model. That's what's on the table in your 3-tiered approach. Deny it all we want to. More taxpayer money will fix the problems. Stop it now. Thank you. Welcome to Burke County.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Gwen Hood.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Gwen Hood. I'm honored to serve with a Better Life Animal Rescue, the Animal Advisory Board, the Burke Animal Services Foundation, and also the Burke County Animal Welfare Alliance. I'm here tonight to support the proposed budget and the building of our new county animal shelter. I'm here to praise our Board of Commissioners and our new county manager, and especially those who stood with us over the years for animal welfare reform and to help to push for a more compassionate county shelter and a bigger, better county shelter. And at this time, I would like to specifically thank Commissioner Mulvey and Commissioner Carswell for standing with us over the years every time. This new animal shelter will be a beacon, not only for our county, but it will be a beacon for the state of North Carolina. Several years ago, I spoke in front of the county commissioners and I talked about how our little county could actually lead North Carolina. And I think we're making major strides to be able to do that in animal welfare. The spay-neuter clinic that's planned for the new animal shelter building will save more lives, will greatly reduce the number of unwanted and abandoned litters of puppies and kittens. The spay-neuter clinic alone is worth it. We are in a crisis here in Burke County with strays, with abandoned animals, with requests for owner surrenders. There's not enough fosters. We're all doing everything we can, but even our rescue, a Better Life Animal Rescue, we have seen tripled numbers in calls coming in for help. The quarantine areas that are planned for the new shelter, animal shelter, will also provide life-saving measures. Animals that are entering the shelter now have no way to be quarantined, and the staff is forced to make very, very hard decisions. The new building will have these quarantine areas, and therefore animals that are brought in that are sick with contagious but very treatable illnesses. So therefore, the quarantine areas will greatly increase the lives that are saved in our county, the animals. So many animal advocates in our county are proud of our Burke County Animal Services staff. Caitlin, Elizabeth, Will, Stella, everyone over at Burke County Animal Services, they are so dedicated and they prove it every day. They are to be commended. Just think of how many more lives that this wonderful staff at Burke County Animal Services will be able to save with the new shelter. It truly is a dream come true for so many of us who have fought the good fight, and we continue to fight the good fight every day. We're continually trying to work toward this county to become a no-kill county. We have not lost hope in that. The new building will also lend more opportunities for public education and to help families become more responsible pet owners. It's going to offer more programs and room to do so and room to reach these people. So I want to thank the commissioners. I want to thank you, Kay, Brian Steen. Brian stood with me at a meeting several years ago. I will never forget it. It was a pivotal turning point in that meeting. And I also want to thank our new county manager, Brian Eckley. It truly takes a village, and we deeply appreciate everybody who is part of this village. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maynard Taylor, and I have some handouts for you.
Very pleasant good evening to you and to the county commissioners, Mr. Manager, good report, to clerk and to staff that are here, and to citizens who care enough to show up, sorry Mike, and participate. So we appreciate that a whole lot and thoroughly enjoy it. There's a country song that was very popular a few years back that said, "That's my story and I'm sticking to it." Well, I want to tell you that I have worked on this for a couple of weeks now, and I had at least 2 good presentations to make to you. And yet yesterday I looked at myself and I looked at it and I said, wait a minute. I said, what can I do? What can I do? What kind of presentation will be listened to? And so I chose, and not to get here with you because I just barely got through with it at 5:30, but I decided I'd take my own property and give you what you're trying to tell us will work for Burke County. So you have a list there in front of you of Maynard and Shirley Taylor's property. One is on here that was my brother's property, and we've rearranged that. It's not on there. It is on there, but I had to leave it on there because of the 21 and 22-year figures and the 20-year evaluation. But as you look at that chart, gentlemen, I want you to see the total down at the bottom of 2020. Mine and Shirley's property was valued at $422,850. If you move over to 2023, you'll see that new figure with the new evaluation at $688,000. $81,918. Now, folks, most people would be tickled to death with that, wouldn't they? But the fact is, that is more than a 250,000 jump in my evaluation. Now, if you're like me and you're living on your old mom's and dad's and grandparents' property, you never built a house to make money off of it. You didn't build a house and plan on moving. If God gave me 120 years on this earth, I wouldn't want to sell my house. I have no desire to sell my house. And yet, I am going to pay taxes on a much increased value that I didn't ask for and feel that it's out of reason. Now, they did come back, and I appealed my taxes, and they lowered it a little less than $20,000. So, but the point of all this is as you look to what you're talking about of raising and the tax rate is going to be and how much more money it's going to cost individuals. If you look under landfill, you'll see that in 2023, I will pay right at $252 in landfill. And look at your fire department. Wow. I'm paying probably 3 times the fire department for my taxes, on my taxes, than I was 4 or 5 years ago. If you look and consider that when the item came from Ikard Fire Department that they wanted to build a second fire department, how many of you know the question that I asked while I served on the Commissioners Board? What was the question I asked? Anybody remember? You should, because my question was, were you going to have to raise our taxes in East Burke County to pay for this new fire department? You remember the answer? No. Guess what you did last year? You raised the tax 2 cents for everybody who lives in the eastern part of the county. So in 2021, my tax was $2,115. In 22, it was $2,462. If you go to your first column under 2023, the tax at 56 cents will raise my taxes plus the landfill and the fire department to $3,500. Now that's real figures, folks. If you go with the 54 cent, it raises it to $3,400. If you go to 52 cents, it's $32.96. And if it's to get it to about where my taxes should be, your tax rate would be 48 cents. Do you read that across there? Question? Now, if you drop down a line, you will see that I'm being fair and honest as possible. I have deferred taxes on deferred value on some of the property. I took that off to be even more fair. And if you fall under 23 under tax 56, taking off the 850 which was deferred, you got 2656. Excuse me, I read that wrong. Yep, 2656. The next category, 2581. 20 and under the 52 cent category, 2506.80, which is still more than the taxes that I paid just a year ago. Net total taxes are at your 56 cents is about $250 more. I don't know if anybody recalls when we went up so much in taxes about 15 years ago. My taxes went up so much. And they had my value on my bottom land, which is floodplain, valued at $8,000 an acre. And the gentleman, when I wrote a complaint about it, said, well, I'll just buy that property, put 2 mobile homes on it, and da-da-da-da-da. I said, yeah, I guess you could. But you couldn't get down to it because it's down a sharp curve. Some of y'all been to my house. You know where I live. So the guy apologized, and they lowered the value of that tax, that value on the property to $2,000. And it's good ground to hold the earth together, but it's not good ground to build upon. You can't get to it. And if you made it level with the road, you'd spend $100,000 hauling in dirt. So taxes that y'all charge should be based on a more fair system. I've had some ideas. I have never presented them, but how many of you know that you're raising taxes? And this is a very important question. You're raising taxes on people who make less than $20,000 a year to pay your fancy employees who are making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000, $200,000 a year. Does that sound reasonable to you? Any of you? Does that sound reasonable that you raise taxes on people who can't hardly pay? I know somebody a couple of weeks ago gave up their cable TV because they couldn't afford it, and yet we want to get more money out of those people to pay high-level employees who want to make more. An employee told me just a couple of weeks ago that he quit. He retired from Burke County. His retirement pay is $300 more a month than it was while he was working. Citizens of Burke County loses 2 ways. They lose because they're paying more money because he's retired. They lose because that's no more a productive employee. And your system, which you didn't create, but we have adopted it over the years, that it really needs to be seriously checked and looked at. I know I'm running way over time. When you look at the tax numbers of 23 and compare budgets, we'll surmise the following facts on my taxes. My taxes per year is more than my power bill. My taxes are more than our grocery bill. Noted that grocery bills are going out of sight, and that may change this year. My taxes are more than home insurance and cars insurance together. 4 vehicles. Note the lowest tax, 48 cents, is about the same as my 22-year taxes. I know that a government has to have its money. And I know that the government's only source most of the time is taxes from the county citizens. But when you signed your ethics code, you signed a code that said you will be reasonable and don't charge excess money. And to be careful of which projects you choose, that you can't really determine what the end of the cost is going to be. And those are important things about choosing the taxes. I don't like paying taxes for room and board of people who can afford to pay for it themselves. I don't like paying taxes for animal shelters. That if somebody's going to bring that animal into that animal shelter, they should have enough money to pay for the care of it and not come back to the taxpayers. That's taxation without representation in a sense. You don't get to decide the rules of the animal shelter, but your taxes Jeff, I appreciated when this came up before, and the bill was $6 million, and you said, and I did a chart and I didn't bring it, but the tax for 20 years on the average dog animal impoundment was over $100 a night for a dog. You can go to any motel, not any, but a lot of motels down at Hickory, Morganton, and as a human, and get free breakfast and stay for $79. And 20 years at $100 a night per dog or cat or animal is a way out of reason for taxpayers to pick up that budget. I hope you do a zero budget. I know you've probably got your mind made up, but too many people who have a very low income and they're fast losing. The Lord has blessed me immensely. I thank Him every day. I thank Him for this day, but I think we ought to have more commissioners and more people voice and get up and speak up instead of keeping our mouths shut when things have got out of sorts. And we're a little bit out of sorts. We're taking better care of our employees and could care less about the taxpayer. And your number one concern is supposed to be the citizens of this county. Thank you.
Gina Walker Bailey.
Good evening. This is probably the first time I've ever had to use a microphone so somebody can actually hear me. So my voice is a little rough tonight. I apologize, but my allergies are taking me down. But in our current two-party system, it's difficult to distinguish a Republican from a Democrat based on party leaders down to the smallest government level that choose to continuously tax and spend. Elected conservative leaders have diminished trust in those who have elected them. Government should tax only to raise money for its constitutional functions. As conservatives, we believe in a limited government that serves the people rather than one that burdens it. We believe that government at all levels should not spend money it does not have and avoid passing debts on to future generations. These are just a few of the values and beliefs that we as Republicans and conservatives stand on. As a conservative elected official in Burke County, will you choose to place a burden on me and my family? My taxes have drastically increased due to inflation in the housing market over 50%, all while the income of my household has decreased due to inflation. All the while, due to reckless spending by our government. Many quote-unquote conservatives have not only burdened, but they have harmed their people. With record high and long-lasting inflation, I am reminded of the great inflation of the 70s when greedy politicians had forgotten whom they served. Will my county leaders choose spending and increase taxes that will not benefit me, myself, my family, or my fellow citizens? When your citizens are struggling to provide groceries for their family or fill their gas tanks to get to work, will you add to their burden when they receive their new tax bill this July? If they cannot afford to pay the massive increase, will they live in fear of losing their property because they can't pay the increase? Will you vote to expand county government rather than rein it in and say that you stand for limited government? You will not see or hear any Democrat leaders here condemn your plans to increase taxes or even tell you to curb your extravagant spending. Your plans for unnecessary buildings and centers that will cost the citizens of Burke County for generations to come. But what the Democrats will do is sing your praises as you vote against the things you are supposed to represent and the things you were sworn in to uphold. And the Liberal News Herald will make a spectacle of the Republican Party yet again as its front page story shares that their party's own members have yet again voted against the things that they say they stand for. A great man named Ronald Reagan once said, "Republicans believe every day of the year is the 4th of July, and Democrats believe that every day is April 15th. Which one do you believe?" I ask you tonight to choose which side of history you will fall on. The Board of Commissioners that burdened and that harmed its own citizens due to its tax increases and your reckless spending? Or will you be a board that is remembered for serving its people well and putting the needs of your county's people first above your own agendas, your wish list, and your political gains? I thank you guys very much.
Jordan Lester.
Hey, good evening. My name's Jordan Lester, and I live here in Morganton. The last revow was done in 2019. It's only mandated to be done every 8 years. It was done and completed when the housing market bubbled like we hadn't seen in 20 years. I'm sure nobody here could have predicted that, but that's just the way it worked out. The overinflated home values have other unintended consequences. Folks are also going to be shocked when it comes time for homeowners' insurance renewal bills come due due to these property values. These, together with prices of electricity, gas, groceries, and everything else on the rise, I ask that you not inflict this increasing financial burden on the citizens of Burke County. Many of them are barely scraping by as it is. Citizens aren't going to be pleased with the Republican County Commission increasing their tax bill, especially during this extreme inflationary period. But I bet they'll remember when it comes time to re-election time, which is just next year. I ask that you consider postponing results of the inflated reevaluation until housing prices correct and come back to reality, and revisit this when the economy is better suited. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Mr. Ed Moslish.
Good evening, Commissioners, fellow citizens. The budget manager said during his presentation that a 56-cent tax rate would make this budget, quote, transformational. I submit, Commissioners, that the citizens of Burke County have had enough transformation since Barack Obama uttered those words in 2008. I know that Republicans have. It's not your job or the job of any government to transform us. You're stewards and servants, not owners and drivers. I ask that you remember that. A core Republican principle is that the people can spend their money better than any government can. The burden should be on the county commissioners to explain why they think they can spend more of the people's money better than the people can. I ask that you do that and remember that. Tax increases can be achieved through two means: increases in the rate or increases in the base. This is a tax increase that we're talking about. We can't hide behind, as Commissioner Burns tried to do earlier, reducing the rate here. People are going to be writing bigger checks to the government. This is not a 25% decrease or cut or any cut. This is a tax increase because the base is increased. Everybody's valuation has been affected by inflation. Everybody's valuation has been affected by the housing market boom. We are all going to pay more in taxes. That's not something that I condone, and I don't think anybody on this board should condone. July 4th is coming. This country was founded in part on a tax revolt. I implore the county commissioners not to instigate a tax revolt in the county. Instead, I urge that if you really feel like you want to spend the people's money, the first thing you should do is take a small amount of that money and invest it, yes, invest it, in a referendum I looked it up under state law. I don't believe state law would pay for it and allow it, but you can spend our money. You're spending our money right now. Pay for a referendum. Ask the people whether they want a tax increase. Let the people speak on this issue. I'm speaking now. I do not want a tax increase. And I'm confident that my fellow citizens don't want one either. Thank you and good night.
That's all that I have, Mr. Chairman.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this issue?
May I add one other comment briefly? Won't take it just a moment. Again, I've spoken. I just want to briefly say something. I know we talk about communication with Burke County taxpayers. I'm going to tell you what YouTube is a joke. I checked it this afternoon. Do you know how many people the May 16th budget presentation looked at YouTube? It counts everybody and I'm going to be honest with you, I've logged onto it probably 12 times. 12 of the less than 200 views have been yours truly. So you're not communicating with the citizens of Burke County, first and foremost. You've got 2 newspapers in the county. Circulations, I have no idea on what the newest one is. The other one is, I'm ashamed to admit it. So keep that in mind when you look at communication with the taxpaying citizens of the county. Whose job is it to communicate with the county citizens? They're not watching YouTube. If less than 200 people since May 16th have seen the budget presentation, do you agree with that? Does anybody agree with that? I'm realistic. I dissected the budget. I will dispute so many things in that budget, it will blow your mind. If you want to increase taxes, increase taxes. There will be repercussions. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Since he was allowed to readdress, I would like to readdress a few statements that have been made. First of all, I'm very saddened that this is turning into a political debate. I am a Republican. I am a conservative. And I am approving and voting, and hopefully this proposed budget will go through. Sometimes we have to step up for sacrifices that are important. I would like to address, and particularly, a statement by Mr. Maynard Taylor, with all due respect. He said that he didn't feel like taxpayers should have to pay for animals that are going into the shelter. I would like to remind Mr. Taylor that all of us that are fighting hard for animal welfare in this county, to have a new building to help the situation in this county, to help our Burke County Animal Services team. It is taxpayers that are also creating this problem. There are so many people in this county that are not being responsible with their animals. They're not spaying and neutering them. They're not getting them to the vet on an annual basis for their rabies, for their vaccines. They're not giving monthly heartworm preventative, which is so easy to prevent. And you want to lecture this group on taxpayers not paying for animals? We have a responsibility. We have a moral responsibility to take care of these strays and these abandoned animals that taxpayers are abandoning. I humbly hope that this does pass, that we do get that animal shelter that is most desperately needed in this county. Thank you for letting me speak again.
Okay, the other two that I've got here.
So this will be the last speaker that's going to speak twice. After this, anybody else
You know,
needs to be the only time they speak.
Thank you, Scott. I would just like to add that while I love animals, in fact, I took in a rescue in the last 12 months, they are not paying taxes. We are giving more to animal services than we give to seniors and veterans combined. Now, that's two categories that's been paying taxes for years. And we are not helping them like we're helping animal services. So I'm sorry that it's such a burden. I'm sorry that the taxpayers don't want to do what they want to do per their guidelines, but they don't pay taxes. We should be appropriating the money to the people that are paying these taxes and what their needs are. Thank you.
Is there anybody that has not spoken that wishes to speak on this subject?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dr. Jennifer McGrady. I am the overseeing veterinarian of Burke County Animal Services. And I did not prepare anything today because I was not expecting there to be so much backlash as there was. I have seen many community members come forward saying desperately that we need a new animal shelter. And I agree that the costs are getting out of hands because they are paying me at my personal clinic to do most of the medical care. Prices would be, or costs would be greatly decreased if we had everything in-house. I stood up here this afternoon receiving a governor's award for volunteerism because of the time that I am giving to this county, to these animals free of charge. I didn't have to do that alone, just doing health certificates to send some of these animals up north to save their lives, because that's the only thing we can do, because we do not have enough fosters or adopters in this county to deal with our intake. That alone should cost me, or should cost y'all, technically, at least $45 per animal, and I do it for free because I'm here for them. But if we have this new facility, if we have especially the spay and neuter clinic, this is not just for the animals. This is a service for our community members. They will be able to get healthy, adoptable, already spayed and neuter animals that will not contribute to a problem. I would love to see in the future, if we do approve this and get a medical clinic, that this can become a community clinic too for some of our low income citizens. But I do agree that we need it. We talked, some people mentioned earlier that, pushing this debt, pushing this cost down the line for others to pay. Well, we're just going to be pushing more problems down the line if we don't seek correction to these decades-old building. And that's not only animal services building, but like the first responder buildings that were mentioned in the budget. These things are services to our citizens and shouldn't really be downgraded as some sort of just we're throwing money at it. All these things that are proposed, especially the animal services building and the things affecting the first responders, will go directly to benefiting our citizens. And I think that's an important thing to make outside of just let's not spend money, but let's spend money towards the things that are going to help our citizens directly. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that has not spoken that wishes to speak on the issue of the budget? There being no more, I'm now going to close the public hearing. Gentlemen, at this time, I'll ask what the pleasure of the board is.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the fiscal year 23-24 budget ordinance number 2307 by show of hands.
Gentlemen, you've heard Commissioner Burns' motion, signify with the uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, Commissioner Burns, myself, Vice Chair Britton, and Commissioner Carswell voted in affirmative. Those against? Commissioner Smith? Mr. County Manager, at this point, we're going through several motions. Do you want to give us clarity on each motion so everyone will understand what we're doing and why we're doing it?
Yes, sir. For the action slide that's on the screen, you've obviously held your public hearing. You have adopted, the majority of the board, proposed budget ordinance. Because of the relationship and some of the consent orders with Burke County Public Schools, the next action item is for the commissioners to consider a memorandum of agreement that links the budget you just approved to the public education funding to public schools of $18.5 million. That's your next action item. We go one at a time, or I can run through however you prefer.
Let's do one at a time. Any comments, questions, gentlemen? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve a memorandum of agreement between Burke County and Burke County Board of Education for fiscal year 23-24.
Thank you, Vice Chair Britton. All those in favor of Jeff's motion signify with uplifted hand. That motion carried 5-0. Madam Clerk. Mr. County Manager.
The next item for board consideration is item number 4, which is consideration of the 8 proposed personnel policy amendments. Again, we've talked about those in detail. They're in your packet, but those are, again, components to compliantly implement the budget as presented. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time as the board to consider those.
Thank you, Mr. County Manager. Any questions, comments, gentlemen, on this specific one? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the following recommended personnel policies as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. That is 5-0, Madam Clerk. Excuse me, gentlemen. So the next item, I'm going to ask to recuse myself on these next 2 motions. I will now turn over the meeting to Vice Chair Britton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because our chairman is a board member on the Valdez Economic Development and Investment Corporation, he is asked to be recused. I'll entertain a motion to accept that recusal.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we accept Chairman Moley's recusal from this vote.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by the uplifted hand. All right.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would also enter the motion to execute funding for VEDIC for fiscal year 24. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. You've heard the recommendation to accept the recommendation. Those in favor, signify by the uplifted hand. 4. Madam Clerk. And with that, I'll turn the floor back over to our chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. We need to do the same thing for Vice Chair Britton, who also serves on the BDI board, and that's going to involve the next 2 motions. So, gentlemen, you've read the motion. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I vote that we accept the recusal of Vice Commissioner Jeff Britton in the matter related to BDI.
Gentlemen, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Motion carried 4-0, Madam Clerk. Gentlemen, we also have another motion that we do need to adopt. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we execute the funding for BDI for fiscal year 24.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that measure carried 4-0. Thank you, gentlemen. This will bring us to item number 8, informal public comments. I'll ask each speaker. In this forum, it is limited to 3 minutes. And I'll ask Madam Clerk if we have anybody signed up to speak.
Yes, we do, Mr. Chairman, and the first one is Mr. David Moore, and I have a handout for you.
Thank you. I'm David Moore from Asheville. I've been working in Burke County for 40 years. I'm the archaeologist with the Exploring Jawara Foundation, or EJF, and I'm here to speak about EJF and the value of living history. EJF offers public history programs, especially regarding the Native Americans at Jawara and the earliest Spanish explorers at Fort San Juan. We present in schools, at the Berry site, at the Living History Village at Catawba Meadows Park, to local civic organizations, in Zoom lectures, at community days, and the list goes on. We will have a permanent exhibit in the new Sit-in Learning Center at the History Museum of Burke County. Since forming in 2008, EJF has presented programs to more than 30,000 people of all ages. EJF practices living history. Hearing that term, you might think of Jamestown or Old Salem here in North Carolina, places where locals and tourists experience history that has statewide and national significance. EJF offers a similar experience at the Living History Village at Catawba Meadows Park. Yes, it's on a smaller scale, but the story is unique and significant. Let me briefly summarize the Jawara and Fort San Juan story. The Spanish built 6 forts in 1567. 3 of those forts form a triangle. Fort San Juan, located at the Berry site, a second fort located east near Salisbury, and the third south near Camden, South Carolina. We know Spanish soldiers routinely prospected for gold. They failed in their search, and in 1568, Native people destroyed Fort San Juan along with the other 5 forts. Spain never again tried to colonize the Carolinas. Now let's consider that triangle again. In the middle of that triangle, in the vicinity of Charlotte, the first gold rush occurred in the late 18th to early 19th centuries. Prospectors picked gold out of the creeks, and the mint in Charlotte specialized in gold coins. Given more time, the earlier Spanish soldiers would certainly have found that gold less than 30 miles south of Jawara. What then? Fort San Juan would have been immediately reinforced with every resource of the Spanish crown in anticipation of the same riches found in Mexico and South America. The increased Spanish presence would have doomed 18th century English plans to occupy the land south of Jamestown. Charlestown would not exist. Latin America would extend into the Carolinas. In fact, the Native rebellion at Fort San Juan changed American history, and with it, world history. The story of Jawara and Fort San Juan is essential to American history. It's an important educational resource and a vital resource for local heritage tourism. The Exploring Jawara Foundation looks forward to building our capacity to support local educators and local heritage tourism in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
Tommy Carpenter.
No, that's what I was going to ask. Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. I'm going to ask Mr. Black in the back to bring a microphone to the gentleman seated. If you'd like to do so, or if he'd like to speak, we can bring the microphone to Mr. Carpenter.
This is being read. This is Reverend Tommy Carpenter. And what he's here today to do is just to read in reference to support of the Confederate statue that stands on the square. And this is the where he spoke from. The will of God prevails. In great contest, each party claims to act in accordance with the will of God. Both may be and one must be wrong. God cannot be for and against the same thing at the same time. In the present evil war, it is quite possible that God's purpose is something different from the purpose of either party, and yet the human instrumentalities, working just as they do, are the best adaptation to effect his purpose. And this was something I think that President Lincoln was thinking as he had tried to deal with the Confederate and the Union in reference to the war. Like a figure of diminishing slavery. Like a figure from Israel's ancient history, Lincoln was arguing with God, but it was no longer a domesticated deity, an American God, but the ruler of the nations. This truth had begun to dawn to Lincoln, that this God was not at the nation's beck and call, but the nation at his. His thinking was beginning to diverge from the past, followed by Beecher, Dabney, and the overwhelming majority of his contemporaries. Number one, how, if at all, are some or all of these thoughts prevalent in today's argument for or against the removal of Burke County's Confederate monument and statue? Number two, another question. Knowing that today there are Christians on both sides of this issue of the removal of Confederate memorials, how should we approach the argument for its removal? Number three, Lincoln appears to conclude that God is accomplishing something different than what either side is aware of. Could this be the same today? If so, what do you think God is doing? Thinking.
And to the county commissioners tonight, we would like to say from the Burke County Coalition of Reconciliation that we love you, that we appreciate what you're doing, and we're coming together to work forth efforts that we might be able to come to some conclusion, because in the dispensation of time, we have seen God move in ways that not even we can expect or do. As personally, I have seen God take down the signs off the Burke County Courthouse where they was coloreds only water fountains, whites only water fountains, coloreds only bathrooms, and colored whites only bathrooms. But now, in the dispensation of time, I have seen that there's only men's bathroom and women's bathroom. And I believe that God can use us to work along with you to make an effort to make the right choice. God bless you, and we love you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Carla Kincaid?
Good evening. My name is Carla Kincaid. I am born and bred Burke County. Of course, all of you know. I'm not a Democrat or Republican. But it's not about that. As somebody said, I'm God's child. I am unaffiliated. And I think eventually we'll see that come to pass, that there'll be no more Republican, no more Democrat, because they can't even get along with their own parties. But I just came to share with you about Juneteenth. I told you that this was going to be kind of educational as I come up as well, which falls right in there with the Confederacy. And I just want to speak of a lady. Her name was Mrs. Lee, and we have several AME churches here in Burke County. I don't know if you even have tried to, the community knows about AME. It seems like that you don't have that much of a population. I think it's important to know where the AME church came from. Of course, they were bred out of the same thing we go through and the same thing the slaves went through, of course, because it was in St. George's Church in Philadelphia, where we were told to get up off our knees because we couldn't pray down in the balcony, just like everything else. So that's how the AME church evolved. It wasn't something that we just put up, you know, and I know that some people are not interested in it. That's our stories. So, you know, sometimes we're not interested in other people's story. But I just wanted to share with you about Juneteenth and Opal Lee, who was a Methodist, AME. she was the person who actually stood alongside the president, Joseph Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris as to sign the bill and to designate in Juneteenth as a national holiday. I think I heard somebody say something about July the 14th as a 4th. As a smaller child, maybe in my teens, I wondered why we celebrated July the 4th and why African Americans celebrated July the 4th, because I knew that just from history and being taught in the segregated churches that we weren't really free in 1776. And I think all of you know that. Maybe the country got their freedom, but our ancestors did not. President Biden was reported to have knelt down before Mrs. Lee before signing the bill and giving Mrs. Lee the first pen that he used. In addition to using her voice to gain that support, Miss Lee for many years had walked 2.5 miles mornings and evenings to symbolize the 2.5 years that expired before enslaved people in Texas knew about the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Miss Lee sees Juneteenth as a unifier versus a black or African American event because people of all races and all cultures actively engaged to ensure its elevation to a national holiday status. Just as slavery was abolished, it took more than African Americans to be able to do that. And one day, I hope that this county and the city commissioners, the city officials and the county commission can come together in unity on something as well as far as the statute is concerned. Even though African Americans are a small part of this community, and some of them see it like you do, there's not a need to take it down to, and that goes African Americans as well as whites. But I might not happen when I'm here. But like I said in the past, I'm speaking for the future. I don't want young people in the future to say, well, why didn't somebody stand up and do something about that? That could have happened years ago. That could have happened 100 years ago, and nobody stood up. Nobody stood up. Some of the people did not stand up, and those people maybe has that same mindset today that they don't need to see that down as well. But it's all about dignity and integrity, and I feel like a little bit of progress is better than no progress at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Bev Carlton?
Good evening. Y'all be here a long time, don't you? The month of June has a lot of observances. It's National Home Ownership Month, and Olive Hill CDC is a housing counseling agency. We serve many people in many ways. So we help people save their homes from foreclosure. We've helped over 2,000 people in the last 20 years save their homes from foreclosure. We help people buy homes affordably with down payment assistance and closing cost money. We do many things in this county, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because I had requested that June 24th be declared Multicultural Unity Day. And if I can, in what time I have remaining, read what the declaration says. It says, whereas the County of Burke, City of Morganton supports the Great Seal of the United States of America, which bears the inscription E pluribus unum, which translates from Latin as out of many, one, and whereas the County of Burke, City of Morganton recognizes that strength is derived from its residents and it strives to bring awareness, recognition, and celebration of the diversity among us to safeguard the freedom and values for which our county and city stands, as well as the unity of our community and residents. And whereas the greatest asset of the County of Burke, City of Morganton is its people, and whereas the County of Burke, City of Morganton is comprised of multicultural, multi-ethnic, and multiracial citizens, and whereas friendship, collegiality, civility, respect, and kindness are commonly shared ideas of the collective citizenry of Burke County and the City of Morganton. Whereas our county's proud history has been achieved through the contributions of diverse fabric of races, ethnicities, and cultures, and we are committed to maintaining mutual respect, social justice, and equality as fundamental aspects of our community beyond a single day of recognition, and we seek to deepen the understanding and expression of our humanity by cultivating more inclusive attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. And whereas the County of Burke, City of Morganton are committed to implementing sustainable social and civic support of diversity initiatives and overcoming prejudice, fears, and stereotypes while striving to provide a healthy and welcoming environment for all residents. And whereas Racial Unity Day was started by the Baha'i National Spiritual Assembly in 1957 as an observance to promote racial harmony and understanding, and whereas the purpose of the Burke County Multicultural Unity Day is to recognize that the people of our nation are its greatest asset. Further, the purpose is to recognize that our nation comprises multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial citizens, and to encourage friendship, collegiality, civility, respect, and kindness among them. Whereas Multicultural Unity Day is a time to celebrate the commonly shared ideals of the collective citizenry of our nation by encouraging communities across the United States to reflect on the beauty and richness of the diverse peoples with a spirit of amity toward one another. Whereas we dedicate this day as Multicultural Day as a symbol of solidarity, recognizing the variety of backgrounds, races, genders, sexual orientation, ages, religions, as well as numerous cultural perspectives, innovations, and contributions by all represented within our great city, and encourage everyone to honor, recognize, and embrace diversity through our workplaces, our schools, our community, and our country. Now, therefore, and I can't read this, it says, you, the county commissioners, do hereby proclaim Saturday, June 24, 2023, as Multicultural Unity Day in Burke County, and encourages all residents and community members to explore, celebrate, and embrace those who have contributed to the richness of our city, our community, and our nation. On this coming Saturday, Olive Hill CDC will be observing Multicultural Unity Day in this block out here. We invite you to the Jammy Jam block party this Saturday on Bush Hill Street, and hope that you will come and celebrate with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I just publicly apologize? We had a good meeting probably 2 weeks ago and talked about a potential agenda item, and I simply missed the deadline to get that in front of the board, so I just want to publicly apologize. Learned a lot about the organization and enjoyed that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. County Manager.
That's all the cards I have.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Then we'll move us to consent agenda. Now I'll ask the county manager to review the items on the consent agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several items for consideration this evening. Each of these, as you're aware, the board was presented in detail at your pre-agenda meeting. Our first item for consideration is from Western Piedmont Council of Government, specifically Area Agency on Aging, and its acceptance of the FY 23-24 block grant. Item 2 is from our Finance Department and the Board of Commissioners, and this is consideration of reappointment of our Tax Administrator, John Bridgers. Items 3 through 8, bear with me, are all from the clerk, and item 3 is a resolution amending our 2023 meeting schedule, as we've discussed, foregoing the both July and August pre-agenda meeting. Item 4 is an appointment and removal to the JCPC Board. Item 5 is an appointment to the Burke County Board of Adjustment. Item 6 for consideration is reappointment of applicants to the Social Services Board. Item 7 is appointment and consideration of appointment to the Western Piedmont Community College Board of Trustees. Item 8 is both the reappointment and removal of the Partners Behavioral Health Management Board. Item 9 is approval of the water shortage response plan as presented by General Services Department and required statutorily. Item 10 is also from General Services. This is to facilitate the ongoing HVAC project at the Foothills Higher Education Building. Items 11 or 12 for consideration, both from the Tax Department. Item 11 is your May 2023 tax collection report. And finally, item 12 is your May release refund report from the Tax Department. Happy to answer any questions you may have about those items.
Gentlemen, what's the pleasure of the board?
Chairman, I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Britton. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that carries 5-0. That'll bring us to item number 10 under this. There'll be items for decision. The first being, Madam Clerk, appointment to the Jury Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. Mr. Robert Larup has served on the Jury Commission since 2007 for almost 16 years, and he has resigned. So we need to remove him from the official roster and thank him for his service to the community. We also need to appoint a replacement for his seat to complete the remainder of a term ending September 30th, 2023. You have two excellent applicants, Terry Yunt and Jennifer Francis. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Gentlemen, questions, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Jennifer Francis.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. Are there any other nominations? So what's the pleasure of the board? All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. It's 5-0.
Thank you. And that, just to clarify, that does include Mr. Lowe's removal. Very good. Thank you.
Brings us to item number 2, reappointments to the Regional Agent Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to make some appointments or reappointments to the Regional Aging Advisory Committee. You have 4 applicants for 3 seats. You have for seat number 1, Jennifer Francis or Mary Wright. For seat number 2, Paige Pitts or Jennifer Francis. Seat number 4, Jennifer Francis or Stephanie Berry. And the terms is for 2-year terms ending June 30th, 2025.
Chairman, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, if it please the chair, I'd like to recommend that we approve all the 3 existing members to be reappointed to that board.
And for clarity, Kay, those existing members are.
Mary Wright, seat 1, Paige Pitts, seat 2, and Stephanie Berry, seat 4.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. 5-0, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That'll bring us to approval of year-end budget amendment. This will be presented by our county manager.
Mr. Chairman, you again presented this 2 weeks ago at your pre-agenda, but this is a customary year-end closeout budget amendment to prepare to close our fiscal year, prepare for our upcoming audit. It also is the initiation of your capital improvement plan and some of the funding mechanics that we've discussed to appropriately allocate some of those resources. And as part of that, it does include some American Recovery dollars, which require an amended ordinance. So you have 2 items for consideration, the year-end budget amendment as well as adoption of this amended ordinance for the American Recovery Plan spending dollars. All of those can be approved with one action or modified as you may see fit.
Gentlemen, questions, comments? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve budget amendment number 1 as presented and adopt ordinance number 2023-08.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that is 5-0. That moves us to item number 4, items for decision. Selection of vendor for employee pay and classification study.
So I, again, will be brief. We talked about this during the budget conversation, that this was one of the top 5 priorities of the Board of Commissioners in your strategic planning process for FY 23-24, recognizing that the county really had never collectively, comprehensively reviewed its pay and classification system in totality. We have about 650 full-time employees, many of which have required advanced degrees and advanced trainings and professional attributes and licenses. And what we've seen over time is technology has advanced, regulations have changed, jobs have become more complicated. We haven't kept pace with that, both with market measured wages and accuracy in our job descriptions, which have created and led to some of those human capital metrics that we talked about. So we've really been focused on this concept of an employer of choice, and again, this top priority of a comprehensive human capital pay classification study. This is really an opportunity for us to engage with a professional consulting firm that comes in and looks at everything from what every job description in the organization documents that an employee does on a day-to-day basis, and then compares those organizationally wide so that we know how to fairly and justly compare the pay of someone who may drive a bulldozer to someone who may answer law enforcement calls or collect taxes. And it's based on, again, looking at accuracy in the job description, figuring out a quantifiable, defendable way to assign grades to those jobs, and then assigning market-measured competitive pay ranges to each of those grades. And that's really a massive undertaking and something that organizations of our size should be doing probably every 5 to 7 years, and it hasn't been done here in decades. And I think that's some of the challenges that we've really experienced when you talk to some of our Lorinda and Alex, some of our team in human resources. Every single day, they're fed with these unaccomplishable obstacles of how and why do we fix these proverbial leaks in the boat. And I think this strategy is really what is the answer to that question. So here are our objectives. We want to evaluate our entire classification and compensation study, look at job descriptions, look at our relationship relative to the labor market, both public and private. We wanted to look at internal ranking of all positions, develop a justifiable, defendable compensation system, and then look at ways to implement it. Really, that'll start with discussions at a board level and at executive leadership level, and that'll go all the way to the details of asking pretty much an employee from every position in the organization to complete what's called a PAQ. It's essentially a survey, position analysis questionnaire that says, tell us what you do on a daily basis, without looking at your current job description, but actually tell us what your practice is, what you're doing when you clock in till the time you go home, and we compare that after some review of supervisors and so forth to what the current job description says and update that. We'll also, again, evaluate those from an internal competitiveness perspective, and we, ultimately, through a highly systematic process, will arrive at a system that we know is accurate, is competitive, and is sustainable. The philosophy, again, is this concept of fair market-driven wages. We don't want to be the highest, but we don't want to be the lowest. We want to make sure that we're within market. We want to balance these internal and external factors. We want to have something that's maintainable and sustainable inside of our fiscal resources. And we also want to have something that's simple and easy to understand. So following the board's endorsement of this strategy, we have released an RFQ, an RFP for qualified firms. We had 5 submissions. The county's executive leadership team received those about 10 days ago, have gone through an extensive review, as well as interviewing firms, and feel like we have a clear leader, a company by the name of Baker Tilly. Many of you may have heard of these folks. They're a national firm. They have worked with many counties in North Carolina, and they do a lot of public sector advisory type work. As you can see on the right-hand side, specifically for Burke County, they're looking at this concept of classification and compensation. Here's a brief snapshot of the team that would be helping us through this process, and as you can see, a super high level of qualification and experience in the public sector with organizations that have exactly the same challenges as Burke County. We're confident in their ability with more than 90 years of experience nationally, and I personally have worked with this firm in another engagement and can really attest to their level of expertise. I think one thing that makes them unique is this SAFE system that is a proprietary system that they own. But when they complete a process like this, they train your internal staff so that you can maintain it. And this SAFE system outlines these 9 very quantifiable and measurable points for each job that allow you to assign this concept of a grade. So when we say, when we're evaluating the pay of a an EMS paramedic to a public health nurse to a administrative assistant to a detention officer, all very different jobs, very different pre-qualifications to do that, trainings and so forth. Some require heavy physical, some require heavy intellectual and licensing and training. But this provides us a very statistical and analytical system to assign grades that then we can assign wages to that's defendable and balances all of our internal and external factors. So they'll also help us, as part of their proposal, they'll develop these peer organizations so that we can do some benchmarking. Those peer organizations will be used to compare the accuracy of our job descriptions, but it'll also be the basis for measuring how our wage ranges that have a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum are compared. We have about 250 total positions that represent our 650 full-time and 800 or other 150 part-time employees, and they'll go through each of those. They'll also look at this kind of quality control factor that isn't weighted, and I think that's critical. A lot of times in these situations, you see a small proportionate share. As a matter of fact, every other submission that we had was only willing to do a small proportional share of those that they advocated was a statistical sampling size. And we felt, because of the lack of attention to this particular area in Burke County's history, we felt that doing 100% made the most sense. They'll also help us with some more compliance and regulatory oversight, such as FLSA designation, to develop career ladders, look at our benefit packages and compare that to the market, as well as pay plan policies, which is another objective of modernizing our human capital system. Lastly, they'll develop a final report and a presentation. Our goal is, as well as training our HR staff, which I think is one of the most critical components of the entire engagement. All of that we think will conclude sometime in early December, in which they'll work with the budget team to develop several options for implementation. And we believe that at your work session in 2024, before you kick off next year's budget season, that this board will be able to evaluate this analysis, review the implementation options, and either and develop or select a strategy that you think is most effective and efficient for Burke County long term. So if approved tonight, we would engage with Baker Tilly. The amount that we budgeted in next year's budget is more than their proposal, so that there is no additional resources required. We think that they could be on site beginning in July, with the bulk of the work happening August through November, and then back in front of this board in about 6 months for options and implementation. That was quick. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any quick questions?
I've got one quick question. One of the things that you generally see when organizations try to correct themselves is you end up with new employees making about the same rate as tenure employees. Will that be addressed in this?
So I think, yes, absolutely. I think that is a component of compression and internal equity. And when you have lagging existing employees that aren't moving through the range adequately and you have vacancies, you're obviously offering those new folks a higher, more market-driven wage to come, because they're unlikely to leave their current employer or to join your team if you're not going to pay a fair wage. And when you're talking about public safety and some of the public health nurses and social workers and some of the things that we're statutorily required to do, we have to have that talent. And so that does create these internal equity challenges and this compression. Oftentimes, when you do these types of analysis, what I've seen, Commissioner, is whatever the new minimum is that's market-based, everybody will obviously move to that point. But then there's what's called a multiplier based on years of service. So they take someone's tenure, specifically in that job or in a related job field, and add some type of compression relief factor to move them through the range that creates separation based on their institutional knowledge and tenure. And I would expect that to be part of this analysis. Yes, sir.
Jim, anything else?
This is not going to be short. I want to say this. I've sat here for 11 years. The three of us, we have sat here for 11 years. And this is the smartest thing we've done. We get people standing there and bash us for not trying to do what we need to do by employees. We've had people sit up here on this board that have bashed employees way too long. We're looking for talented people to come in to do the job. When I sit in Raleigh and I listen to 99 other counties, and they're sitting out there doing the same thing. They're trying to get people, and they don't know where to get them. You have to have a professional firm come in, see what you got, know where you've been, put something together to make a team of talented people. Sometimes you have to pay them. People want to work and move up. I wanted to get promoted when I was working. Jesus, that's what I went to work for. I didn't want to sit there and be on the bottom of the list and make the same old thing all the time. I think every one of you out here tried to do the same thing. This is what this is about. Finally putting together a plan with a fair and equitable way for people to come here. We said we wanted to be the employer of choice. We want people to choose us, and this is the way to do it. With that said, I'm going to make a motion to authorize the county manager to execute an engagement letter with Baker Tilly US LLP for a comprehensive review analysis of the county's classification and compensation system effective July the 1st, 2023, subject to review and or revision by the county attorney if needed. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. That carries 5-0, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. County Manager. That'll bring us to reports and comments. I'll start with Margaret, our County Finance Officer. Any comments?
No, sir. We're just getting ready for year end and happy the budget's passed. Thank you very much.
Mr. County Attorney.
I have some. I can hold them till next month if that would.
That would be good. We'd love to get a double dose in July. Madam Clerk.
No comments.
Mr. County Manager. Commissioner Smith. Mr. Burns.
I do have a couple of things I want to say. Number one, and probably the most important thing I'll say all night, is happy birthday to my beautiful wife. She is at home without me today, so I could be here. I don't think she may have been planning on me being out this late, but I will make it up to her, I promise. The other thing I do want to kind of address real quickly is there seems to be some misunderstanding about this revaluation. There were several comments made that we didn't have to do it. We could have postponed it. Clearly, we could not have done that because we were outside of the 15% mandate to actually do it. So as much as nobody wanted the reval to happen, it was going to happen. Not only were we on a 4-year cycle, we were outside of our 15% margin. The other thing that kind of struck me is, and I don't think it was an attempt to impugn my integrity, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm a man who says what I think and I think what I say. When I said I would be happy to make a motion to lower the tax rate 13.5 cents, that's exactly what we did. We lowered the tax rate from 69.5 cents to 56 cents. There was nothing in that was meant to be clandestine. It's just simply a statement of fact. That's what the motion that I made did. It lowered the tax rate from 69.5 cents to 56 cents, period. And I will end again with, honey, if you're watching this, I love you. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. Vice Chair Britton.
Thanks.
Commissioner Carswell.
Never pass an opportunity to speak. I want to take just a moment to remind all of you commissioners, we're getting close to August, and we're going to be swearing in a new president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. That's never happened in Burke County before, and it's all because we are about advancing. We have vision. We know where we're headed, or where we're going. We've done that over the years. I am very proud of what you guys have done up here. I'm very proud of this budget that we passed. Kay will be getting with you. We're making the arrangements. We talked with Raleigh today for when we go down in August for the little ceremonies, but I hope you and your families enjoy that. And that's all I've got to say, sir.
Well said, Commissioner Carswell. And actually, Commissioner Carswell and I are going to Asheville to serve on the NCACC pretty much for the rest of the week. So looking forward to that. I think we're just going to be in a rain cloud. So anyway, we'll be working. That's okay. I just have a couple courtesy reminders. We will be closed for Independence Day. Our pre-agenda meetings, as we have mentioned on several occasions, for our staff to be able to take vacations, we are not doing pre-agenda meetings moving forward in July and August. So July 5th, August 1st, pre-agenda meetings are canceled. July 12th, there's a community forum, substance abuse use with Beth Macy, which is at 401 South College Street. Doors open at 5 p.m. The event is at 6 p.m., and that is free admission. As we've picked up, and we did see in the budget, to address this issue, we have allotted money for this. Don't litter, pick up trash, cover your loads at the landfill and convenience sites. We preach on it, put money behind what we talk about, and Gary's sitting out there. He's picked up more trash in the county the last 2 years than anybody, so I know he will appreciate it. I would remind everyone, adopt or foster a pet from Animal Services, spay or neuter your pets, and this sounds like a case special. During firework displays, leave your pets inside with a radio or TV turned on. Ensure that your pet is wearing ID tags with accurate contact information, and they need a beer too. So that's a lot, but make them comfortable during the firework displays. So at this point, I will turn over to item number 12, vacancy announcements, which we have plenty, presented by Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the audience. We have the following opportunities for citizens to be engaged in county boards and committees: the Adult Care and Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, City of Morganton Board of Adjustment and Planning Board for the ETJ, Burke Senior Center Advisory Council, the East Burke Senior Center Advisory Board, Council on Aging, Burke County Board of Health, and the Hickory Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. As you can see, there's plenty of opportunities to participate in county government, so please reach out to Kay. She will put you to work. At this point, gentlemen, there is a need for closed session, so I need a motion to go into closed session to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential, to discuss threatened or pending litigation, to preserve the attorney-client privilege, to discuss economic development matters, to discuss contractual matters, and to discuss personnel matters as authorized by NCGS 143-318.11A 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Motion to go in closed session.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Well, 5-0, Madam Clerk, and if somebody needs to step into the men's or ladies' room, please go ahead, and we will definitely, but please let's expedite and be in closed session in 5 minutes. We did have a proper motion to come out of closed session. We're now back in open session.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion and report that the board took action on a personnel matter during closed session.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Motion carried 5-0, Madam Clerk.
Move to adjourn.
Whoa, what was that motion? We did a motion?
They were entered in open session before the board took action on personnel.
They voted on it.
They voted on coming back into open session. I suppose.
What did you say? What was your motion, sir?
Did we?
Yeah, they did something else.
My motion was the board took action on a personnel matter during closed session.
We don't need
We don't need that.
Okay, you need a comment?
Just-
Okay, please, Madam Clerk, please put that comment in the minutes and let's retract that vote.
Okay.
That's good.
JR, what do we do to retract the vote? We're all tired.
Well, you took the vote on it, so just take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to rescind the previous mentioned vote.
Okay. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we adjourn.
All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.